What are the attributes of a successful entrepreneur?
And get to meet your customer and learn what they want. But you want to give them the perception, if not the reality, that you're sensitive to their needs. You always want to engage people smarter than you. The only thing that you have to maintain is being more passionate than anybody else in the organization. You're going to work your butt off. Sundays for family and church and what have you, but part of Saturdays is for the business. The entrepreneur gets home at 7 o'clock at night on a Saturday. What that pillow partner says will make or break your business.
What do you need to build a successful international business?
Building a relationship is not how we're going to do business together. The first part is how we're going to be friends together and how we build chemistry for each other.
How did you initiate and build relationships around the world?
You do one family per country. They'll send you to the right people. They provide you with cover.
Welcome. My name is Daniel Drolet, and I'm the president of the Global Young Entrepreneur Society. The Global Young Entrepreneur Society is an international organization supporting exceptional young people in accomplishing their entrepreneurial ambitions. Co-hosting the interview with me today is Lewis Swire, the director of GYES's UK operations and the editor-in-chief of the Curious Times. Our guest today is Kevin McGovern, chairman and CEO of McGovern Capital. Through McGovern Capital and its affiliates, Kevin has co-founded over 25 companies, 6 of which have become world/category leaders, and he has been lead negotiator in over 15 global joint ventures. Kevin was the founder of Sobe Beverages, the fastest growing beverage company ever in the US, sold to Pepsi, and was one of the 3 owners of KX Industries, the largest manufacturer and worldwide source of water purification filters. He also created the program, supervised and negotiated all global licensing of Tristrata's alpha hydroxy acid patents, which technology was incorporated in approximately 40% of all global skincare products and is sold in approximately 80 countries. His smoothie company, second in industry, was sold to Highland Partners. McGovern Capital is currently involved in several disruptive innovators, including healthy food and beverage companies, proprietary skincare technologies, disruptive pharmaceutical products, global interests in medical and recreational cannabis, several esports teams/organization, sports events and opportunities, global audio improvement technologies, environmental impact/plastics to fuel, advanced agricultural technologies, plant-based foods, and cold brew coffee. Kevin also served as chairman of entrepreneurship at Cornell for over 7 years. We are very pleased to welcome Kevin McGovern.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on. What was your journey and how did it prepare you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, first of all, I am proudly an Irish immigrant son. I was the youngest. All 3 sons got doctorates, so he emphasized education to us. Typical immigrant, get ahead by education. And my dad died when I was 11. My mother was handicapped with bad lungs. So I went to work when I was 12 or 13 with 3 jobs, supporting my mother and helping out whatever I could do with the family. So, I always say to people, hard work never hurt anybody. It certainly didn't hurt me. But it taught me, the value of making a buck, managing a buck, spending it, supporting myself, and I paid my own tuition in high school and I paid for my own clothing. And so I became somewhat of an independent, but I learned what it was like, to be an adult in a way when I was a very young age. And so that was really helpful. And in addition, I have a much lighter hair now, but I'm a redhead. And red-haired people tend to get a lot of grief when they're young. And I was no exception. And whenever people would call me ketchup head or rather be red than dead in the head, I was a pretty tough kid. I've never had a fight with anybody after 8th grade, but I had many during 8th grade and earlier. And I tell people one of my training to be an entrepreneur is when I got hit by a left hook, I came back with a right cross. I didn't go down. And so I developed some mental toughness, working hard, being somewhat of an independent person myself early in life. And being a redhead was sort of a good part of that.
What was your first business and how did you build it?
I had 150 newspapers when I was a kid and blah, 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 and all sorts of jobs. But my first business was at Cornell in college. And with two other fellow students, we developed a 2-for-1 restaurant program in New York City, where students from Ivy League schools, prestigious schools, would go to restaurants in New York and develop good habits of where they wanted to dine. And they get 2 meals for the price of one. And it was called Baxter Associates. And it did fairly well. And one of my partners, he had a much lower cum than me, but he went to Harvard Business School based upon the experience of Baxter's Associates. They were impressed by our progress. But we learned marketing. We learned a lot about the restaurant business in New York. And we learned to really contact alum of Cornell. Cornell, of course, is probably the #1 hotel school in the world. And a lot of restaurateurs and hoteliers in New York are Cornellians. And so we met with a lot of alumni to help us understand the restaurant business and business in general. And of course, we learned early on that, restaurants make their most money off the liquor, not off the food. The margins are not on that food because it's not easy with all the waste in food. And often the bottle of wine or the, spirit that is served at that dinner is the highest margin product. So you learn business, you learn margins. We learned a lot about marketing. It was a really good experience as a businessman.
You have said that determination is key to success. What are the attributes of a successful entrepreneur?
I've already mentioned the word mental toughness. And, people say persistence. I think that's a bit of a weak word. It's much more than persistence. It's dogged persistence, whatever you want to do. You don't get good news every day as an entrepreneur. Actually, more likely than not, as days go by, you get much more bad news. We got a problem. Oh, really? Okay, we got a problem. Well, you got a lot of problems. And how you handle problems and how you, engage them as opportunities and not problems and challenges is often a sign of success. And mental toughness to not fold. That left cross, you come back with a right hook or whatever, and you don't go down. Number 2, you got to listen to your consumer. And, I tell my son, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and listen for echoes from the marketplace. Too many people around the world, they know better than the consumer. They don't. The consumer knows what they want. So you need to survey your customer all the time. You got to go to know. You don't do that just on a digital platform. You go into the store, you go into the restaurant, you go into the facility, and you go to know and press flesh and get to meet your customer and learn what they want. You don't always give them exactly what they want, but you want to give them the perception, if not the reality, that you're sensitive to their needs and that you're providing something that is beneficial to them. Okay. And in terms of team, you always want to engage people smarter than you and better than you. Too often, entrepreneurs are worried about hiring really capable people. Typically, a business has only one CPO, and that's the Chief Passion Officer. That's the person who spends 24/7 thinking about that business. It's like a mission that is their lives. They die if it doesn't work. There's got to be that Chief Passion Officer in an early stage business. And everybody else is a complement to that Chief Passion Officer. And the only thing that you have to maintain is being as passionate, if not more passionate, than anybody else in the organization. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the best looking. You have to be the person who truly believes in every bone in your body that this is going to be a success. And anything and everything you do is concentrated on its success. So it's very, very important. And when you hire those good people, don't give them equity up front. Make them vest. Make them stick around for some period of time, vested in small little hunks. And the last thing is pay attention to pillow partners. People say, what are you talking about? I say, I tell entrepreneurs, when you're working with me, you hear about some of the success we've had. Well, you're gonna pay for it. You're gonna work your butt off. And Sundays for family and church and what have you. But part of Saturdays is for the business. And in those rare instances, I hope, when the entrepreneur gets home at 7 o'clock at night on a Saturday, what that pillow partner says when that entrepreneur enters the door will make or break your business. God, I'm so happy we're working for that company. I know you have a small piece of it, and I know we're earning something that's going to be so good for our family and for our kids. Go for it. That's success. When the pillow partner says, I don't know why you're working for that jerk. You don't even have a piece of the action. You put in all day Saturday on it, etc. That's a recipe for failure. So make sure, I say in the US, send the turkey for Thanksgiving that's coming up to the family. And when you have that softball game or whatever soccer event or whatever in the summer, make sure you spend more time with the pillow partners than your employees. The employees you see every day. Make sure those pillow partners are signed up and on board and know what the purpose of your company is and why their pillow partner is working so hard. We have a little motto in our family office with my son and my family, et cetera. And we have the trademarks, catch the current, make the wave. So we really look for disruptive technologies that are going to leapfrog the competition. I'm not interested in a company that's going to be me too. Plant-based foods. It's not new to have plant-based eggs anymore, right? Actually, we're supplying one of the plant-based egg companies with their plants that comprise. I don't want to do another one. You make money. I don't want to hurt anybody's opinion, but I don't want to be Avis. I don't want to be National Rent-A-Car. I want to be Hertz. And if there's a new idea, I want to be the new Hertz. I want to be Uber. It's not fun to be me too. It's fun to be disruptive, where you leapfrog the competition. And really, what you're looking for are companies that literally have the intellectual property, whether it patents or otherwise, to be able to leapfrog their competition and build a very formidable position. We really like intellectual property, particularly patents. We work quite a bit with patents around the world because we think you build successful businesses around intangible assets, patents and trademarks and brand, etc. And when the big boys buy you out, they want to buy you out, they're not going to give you a great multiple of your sales unless you have a lot of intangible assets, because they're not as creative as you are. Early stage entrepreneurs, we pivot like little PT boats or motorboats. They're battleships. They can't pivot like we can. And so they want to rely on intellectual property, etc. So when they're buying you out for hopefully a large amount of money, they're looking for your intellectual property. So you better make sure you bolster that and think long term of how you're building value in your business.
What do you need to build a successful international business?
International business is very different. Being an American, too many Americans worry about the contract and worry, about fast. Let's get to the business part of it. Internationally, there's three key words to building international success, and those three key words are relationships, relationships, and relationships. You're never gonna sue somebody in China for backing out of a contract. At least I'm not. It's absurd. You're not gonna worry. You worry about the relationship you build with those people around the world. And the first part of building a relationship is not how we're going to do business together. The first part is how we're going to be friends together and how we build chemistry for each other. What's your family like? What's important to you? Your dogs? Give me the names of your dogs. Obviously, and I don't mean this in order of priority, but tell me the names of your kids. Tell me the name of your wife. I want to know. Can I meet your wife sometime? I'd love to. I'd love to meet your family. What's your hobby? You like play golf? Those things are the human side of everyone. Now that I've reached a pretty old age, I realize how human we all are. And, the most famous people in the world, Bill Gates, He has children. You know, he has personal things, and you don't necessarily want to probe every personal matter with him, but you want to find out where his sweet spots are and soft spots. Where's his heart as well as his mind? And building a relationship is all about that. Yeah, you talk business, sure. What are your business goals? How did you get into business? Similar to this interview a little bit. But and what I do, and I write notes after I meet with somebody that I know I want to build a relationship with. I write notes so I'll remember, their wives' names, their secretaries' names. Boy, you better know that secretary's name. Okay, when she describes who's on the phone, if she says that Kevin's on the phone, or hey, Kevin McGovern, that nice guy's on the phone, that means an awful lot to your relationship, right? And wife and children, and what's the dog's name? There's a famous guy in Israel, and I'm going to dinner with him next Thursday night. I say, how's Julie, your wife? How are your kids? I remember it's ADA, and in my notes I know it's Adam and DA, and I know his dog's name is Woody. And those are the first things I ask about. I don't ask about his business and how he's reconstructing Israel. I ask him about Julie, his wife. And so that's how you build international business, is building relationships. And I learned that from a very, very famous man at that time, Jean Varnet. He was a very famous sunglass guy. And he said, you're not going to be working with me in the U.S. until you come over to Switzerland. He's a famous Frenchman, but he lived in Geneva. And you spend a few days with me at my home. And we got to get to know each other before we do business together. And I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot. And it sort of built a foundation for me to understand that building a business relationship is every bit part of building a personal relationship.
How did you initiate and build relationships around the world?
I learned some lessons. I learned a lot of things I tried to do were through government officials. And I've learned that that's not the best way to build an international network. The best way to build an international network, in my opinion, is through families. And you got to learn, though, you do one family per country. A lot of very well-connected families do a lot of different businesses. And if they don't do that business that you want to bring to them, they'll send you to the right people. They're the door to your business in that country. And I can mention names, but not on this interview. But I know one or two families in every country. And frankly, you got to know that one, and you got to go through that door. And they provide you with cover. People don't understand. My students say, cover, what are you talking about? In emerging markets particularly, but all over the world, there's government officials, there's business officials, business people, and there's military. And the more successful you are in a country, the more they have their hand out for you to give them a bribe and give them some part of your business as a accommodation for you to continue to grow in their country. What they won't do necessarily is, if you're connected to a significant family that has a very good reputation, etc., they become a shield for you. And I won't say you're untouchable, but you're less susceptible to those type of situations. We Americans, we cannot bribe. The uniform, there's a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We cannot violate that. So often I've run into the roadblock of being asked for a bribe to continue to do business, and I have to retreat often and wait to get the right family involved, or simply wait for the politician to get out of office and hopefully an honest person come back in. But that's a problem of doing business all over the world. That's not just in one continent or otherwise. So how do you start? You start by building relationships, and you realize that bribing is not going to get you anywhere. And you work through families. Politicians are fine, but families are better. They provide you cover.
Yeah, and speaking of one of the businesses that you built a lot of value in, SoBe Beverages became the fastest growing beverage brand in the world. What was it like building a beverage company?
SoBe was real teamwork. Major companies are not one person ever. There's an inside person, there's an outside person, and there's a team. And Bill Gates had a Baumer inside, and Yahoo. There's always the inside person who counts the pennies, and there's always the outside person who spends the dollars. And I want to meet both. And I want to make sure when we're investing our dollars that I meet the person who's who's looking at the dollars that we invest as if it's theirs and spending it very carefully. And often the spokesperson and the outside person is not necessarily the spendthrift. There's an old expression, and some people disagree, and I'm not sure I always agree with this, but good leaders are not necessarily good managers, and good managers are not necessarily good leaders. There's exceptions all over the place, I agree. But the mentality of being a leader is not necessarily managing every step of the way. It's, I got a vision, and I'm heading for that vision. And the inside person realizes that you can't get from the first floor of a building to the second floor without climbing the ladder or climbing the staircase. And there's step by step by step. I love people, they say, I want to be an astronaut. I say, you like physics? Oh, I hate physics. Oh. People want to leap from the first floor to the second floor, but they don't realize there's a whole process involved, and it's step by step by step. So teamwork is everything. And I just don't like I people. I don't like, during an interview like this, I have to use the word I a lot. I don't really like using the word I. I like we. And Sobe was a we. And, there's three of us founded it. One of the three always talks about I with it. I tell you the truth, it was not he, it was not we, it was we. And one of the examples I use, which would not relate to anybody probably outside of this room, is I'm a baseball fan. I'm a Mets fan, New York Mets fan. And way back when, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was, the Kansas City Royals, a team that I don't think most people couldn't mention one team member today. They beat my Mets. And the Mets, you can remember some of their stars, but you can't remember the stars of the Kansas City Royals. That's the team. The people you don't remember their names that meshed together so well that they didn't care about their name. They cared about the success of the team. That's what builds real successes. And I really believe the team builders are the real successful entrepreneurs wherever they are around the world. The people that say to the employees, we are part of this, and each one of you will have a little piece of the rock. We'll vest it, and you'll partake in the success. That's really important.
So you've successfully sold multiple companies. How do you go about creating an exit strategy to maximize profits?
My first day of class at Cornell Business School, I say, I'm going to teach you, how to build value. Teach you how to build value for your investors. I'm going to teach you how to build value for your employees. I'm going to teach you how to build value for your community. And hopefully I can have some impact on you building value for your world, for your planet. And, the exercise of preparing to exit starts with day one. I'm a great believer, and I'm a great believer in the 7 habits of highly effective people. Have an end game. I'm a recovering lawyer. I was a deals lawyer, and I dealt with venture capitalists on the end of the entrepreneur. And we did a lot of acquisitions and sales of companies. That's called M&A, mergers and acquisition lawyer. And I learned a lot from some of the real pros. My biggest client was InvestCorp. At that time, the biggest acquisition fund in the world. And my firm, I had 12 lawyers working for me. We did the small deals for the big boys, okay? But I learned to be a businessman from these people. And when they buy a company, they'd have in mind, not necessarily stuck on it, who's going to buy it? 3 years. And they build their company with the end goal of selling it to that type of company. And I really believe that's very, very important. Have your end game in mind as you proceed with your company, and make sure that your top executives, if not your employees, know what your end game is. Second point, got to have IP. When these companies sell out for dramatic multiples of revenues, 20, 30 times revenues, that's absurd. The way they rationalize it to the board of, the penny counting board sometimes is, well, we have intellectual property patents, and they amortize the value of that way above the value of the revenues. And so you got to set that up so that when you're asking for a ridiculous purchase price, you have good intangible assets, as I related to before. So IP is very, very, very much part of what you're doing. And the last point is brand. The big boys buy your brand. They don't buy you. You know, everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to work for Pepsi for the next 10 years. No, you're not. First of all, if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably not going to fit the institutional atmosphere of certain companies. I'm not knocking Pepsi. Pepsi happens to be a pretty good company. You're going to go back and do another entrepreneurial project. Once you catch the fever, you know, the fever is, you're in trouble. You're addicted. You got the fever. So you may sign a 1 to 2 year contract to work with the big company. That's about it. And so, you know, your brand is what's going to live on, not you. And Sobe, to this day, we sold it a long time ago. People all remember Sobe. I'm very proud of that. They remember that brand. And that brand is much bigger than the team that built it. It's the image, the culture that we built. We built a culture. You know, we spent $35,000 total on advertising. It was all guerrilla marketing. Make sure that you discovered our brand and you became a Sobe person. Okay. And we were sort of like the Marlboro Man of the early 20th century. And you know, I tell you, wherever I go, last night I went to dinner with some family officers. And I said to this lady that I met from Atlanta, she said, yeah, remember Sobe? I said, what was your favorite drink? She said, the orange drink. They were Sobe generation, you know, and I'm very proud of that. And our team should be proud of that. But we built a brand. And when Pepsi bought us out, they bought that brand. They didn't buy us, and they didn't buy the jars and the bottles that we were contained in. They bought the brand. Just like my son building cold brew coffee with Rise. He's done an amazing job of building that brand, and his team and his partners with building the Rise cold brew coffee. People know Rise. Oh yeah, I know Rise. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the guerrilla marketing you did for Sobe?
We were edgy. You know, we got the most ridiculous sports, motocross racing. We were not we didn't back a football team. We backed a motocross racing group. We did. John Daly was the most controversial golfer in golf. We made him a spokesperson. We wanted to be edgy. We wanted people to smile. You see, Lewis, you're smiling. In the inside of the cap, we put a little expression, a joke. We want you to, when you open up a jar of Sobe, we want you to smile. Okay, and you see how you guys are smiling. We want you to. We didn't want Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicklaus. We wanted John Daly, and I know John Daly's a little controversial. And he got a little more than edgy. He got almost bleedy. He was almost bleeding edge. But everything we did was sort of to be a little tiny bit controversial. And, you know, we were sometimes women's livers didn't like what we're up to. And we loved that because that was free advertising. Guerrilla marketing is getting free word of mouth out there without having to pay for it. That's basically what it is. And we'd be in gas stations with teams, and our point of sale people, we made sure that our jars, our product was looking good. So we spent a lot of time at point of sale making sure that our product looked good and was at the right level, et cetera. We think, you know, your ambassador is your product. And we want to make sure we look good every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we were dynamic. We always had, you know, seasonal beverages. What's Sobe coming up with next? And one of our beverages that we came out for a Christmas drink was Lizard Blizzard. Well, it was so accepted. It was a white substance coconut drink. It was so accepted, we kept it for good. But, you know, we were constantly, what's Sobe coming out with next? Okay. So we were dynamic as a brand. We were constantly serving the consumer with new ideas, and we were listening to the consumer at all times. We visited more delis and bagel shops. You know, I never, ever went to a place ever, and, you know, that I didn't buy a Sobe wherever I went. One time, I swear it's a true story, I took a walk to Central Park, and all these little guys were selling Sobeys. I had to come back because I had to buy like 8 bottles of Sobe because there's 8 stands selling Sobe. So, but you know, you got to do it. If you don't believe in you, and you don't believe and you don't imbibe in you, and you don't immerse yourself in you, you ain't you.
Which areas of technology do you expect to offer the most opportunities for startups in the coming years?
Food and beverages will always have new ideas. We just got patents on cannabis and skincare. I think there's a lot of medicinal benefits in cannabis, and we just got a very broad patent global, will be, it's very broad for medicinal purposes in topicals, et cetera, for cannabis. And then we also apply for bioenhancers in beverages. So food and beverages, always. Now it's plant-based foods are the rage. We have some investments in plant-based foods. But what I'd like to think the theme of all of our companies is wellness, consumer wellness. And, the reason I like wellness is because I like healthcare. We're in telehealth. We have a drug that reduces plaque. There's no drug that does that. We're almost finished with phase 2 on that. Reverses sepsis. And sepsis kills more people than cancer. It's the infection you get in hospitals. And reverses severe COVID. We're not a drug company and drug family office, but my dad died of myocardial infarction, plaque. And when I found out that this drug reduces plaque, no other drug does that, I felt that I'm pretty spiritual, and I feel like God put that in front of me, and I have a mission that I need to help that. Just like in clean water, I feel like I have a spiritual mission to bring clean water to people around the world. So bottom line is health, wellness, the brain. I tell you something, guys, no one has to agree on this call or otherwise. I'm more fascinated by the human brain than I am about what's on Mars. I think the human brain we know so little. There's 100 million neurons in our brain. It's amazing. And Alzheimer's, by the way, first stage of Alzheimer's is plaque, amyloid plaque. And so by working on reducing plaque, we're working on Alzheimer's, we're working on diabetes, critical limb ischemia and mutations, and heart disease. But the bottom line is the human brain. I was just at a presentation last night at dinner, this, neuroplasticity, the adaptation of the brain to different circumstances. And now they're putting monitors on people's heads to find out when they're in the zone. They want to invest, they want to follow traders because when they're in their zone, certain parts of the day, they make better investments than other days. And so now they only want to invest when they're in the zone. The human brain, how many times you've been someplace you thought you were there before? Or if you guys have a girlfriend and they say, I know what you're thinking. There's a lot to, the world of beyond the brain and into the electricity and the vibe. I tell people vibe is a really amazing word. When you meet somebody, you get a good vibe. I believe there's a lot of biology and electricity to that. So healthcare, brain, wellness, telehealth. What's telehealth? Medical care in your home. We're big proponents of that. We work closely with a company called Raziel. We brought it to some of the hospital chains. We think monitoring people in their home 24/7 and having home visits on your TV, that's going to replace a lot, not all, of your emergency rooms. I think that's a huge area of innovation. Part of my lecture in family offices around the world is I talk about 12 disruptions, the dozen disruptions. We're investors in about 10 of them. But 2 that we're not investors in is drones and blockchain. We're investors in esports. We've been for years. We're investors in cannabis. We've been for years. We just haven't really been as good in crypto, and we're still trying to figure that one out, and all that stuff. But we know blockchain's for real, and drones are for real. And we know that drones are being used in warfare. That's too bad. That's terrible. But drones will be delivering products to your home. And I'll never forget, I was speaking at Harvard Law School, and these 2 Australians walked up and said, "You're quite an innovative investor. We installed drone domes." I said, "Drone domes?" They said, "Yeah, there's going to be so much delivery by drones that you're going to need to have a special radio frequency to pass through the maze around your house. Otherwise, you don't know what enemy will be invading your house through a drone." And I thought that was so amazing, drone domes. And we all know that there's negative of everything, whether it's, manipulating the brain or manipulating drones. There's the good side, there's the bad side, etc. So we have to try to make sure that as much of the positive side is utilized as possible, and make sure that those who are trying to use it for bad are curtailed and hopefully restrained. Technology is such a weapon for good. And as you well know, we all worry about it being a weapon for bad.
What is your view on work-life balance?
I was really lucky because I had an office in Greenwich, Connecticut, And it was about 2 miles away from where my kids went to school. And so when my son won the heavyweight championship in 6th grade, I was there because I told my assistant, Katie, I'm leaving. I'll be back in an hour and a half. His lacrosse game is this afternoon. I'll be back. Your family is definitely your greatest asset. The older you get, the more you realize it. Your children, your wife of, all of these years, et cetera, putting up with your baloney, but your family. And if you don't have that balance, I have an expression that I say to everybody, so forgive me for indulging anybody, but what I've learned in my years is the following. You have your mind, your body, and your spirit. You need to exercise each one of them every day. And the more that they're in harmony, my favorite word, the happier and more successful you are. And spirit does not necessarily mean that you're going to church every day, but you're picking up some groceries for that old lady at the counter, and you're smiling at people who really need a smile. The spiritual side is not, it's little things that you do to make people happy. And when you make people happy, you make yourself a lot happier. So I really believe that that's all part of a successful work-life balance. And the happier your family is, typically the happier you are. So it's very, very important. I have 2 grandchildren now, and I'm pop, and I was just with them night before last. One is 2 and one is 4, and when I'm with them, I'm 3. Dinosaurs and Barbie dolls, and I love it. You got to see how ridiculously dumb I act when I'm around those kids. There's nothing better.
Which business books that had a major influence on you would you recommend for young entrepreneurs?
In terms of business, the book that changed my life, I read it in 1992, before you guys were born. And it was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I think that book is just as important today as it is yesterday and the day before. It really teaches you how to be efficient and getting the things done that are important in your life. Not urgent necessarily, but important. Early stage entrepreneurs tend to be like water hoses. Spray and pray. Work on 10 deals, hoping that one will come through. Nah. No. Less is more. It's like dating 10 girls. Good luck. Work on 1 or 2 and make them happen. Yeah, sometimes really, this one's not going to work out. Okay. But less is more. Sow those seeds and build that plan and stick with it and maneuver. Everybody uses the word pivot. Adapt. Darwin. It's not the smartest of creatures that survive. It's not the strongest. It's those who adapt to change. I like the word adapt a lot better than pivot. I think that's overused. Be adaptable. Adapt. And that's what you learn in these books. Good to Great book. You want to hear it? Look, I love Thomas Friedman. The World is Flat is one of his great books. But the one that's more recent, a few years ago, is Thank You for Being Late. Weird title, Thomas Friedman. But I got to tell you something. He's one of the, if I was asked to go to dinner with some leaders, I'd want Thomas Friedman in that room. I think his books are marvelous. And when I teach at Cornell and other places, I talk about Gladwell's book, Tipping Point. I think that's so fundamentally important. And I talk about Moore's curve, technology curve, and I talk about, thanks for being late. It really explains so many technological revolutions in such simple Thomas Friedman language. It's excellent. It's a great book. You want to know how internet got going, how, 07 was such an important year for development of technologies when we were going through the Great Recession. Just a great book. Read it. And, read something that'll get you a little harmonious, maybe The Prophet or something. But, being a leader is having that harmony and having that the buck stops here attitude. You got to learn how to be a leader by being comfortable with yourself. As Covey said, you can't be comfortable and lead others until you can lead yourself. You can't really keep promises to others until you keep promises to yourself. So he emphasized the center, you as the center. And the more you develop yourself, the more you can develop others.
How do you find experts to work with for your medical and technological companies?
I call them in-house gurus. You don't have to have all these people on your payroll. You have to have relationships with them. I'll give you one example. I hope he doesn't mind me bringing him up. His name is Bob Langer. Bob Langer is the greatest inventor of all time. Edison had about 1,100 patents. Bob has about 1,600 patents, last count. And he taught in my class at Cornell. He's a beautiful guy. Of course, he's a graduate of Cornell, but his Langer Laboratories at MIT, and he's the star professor, I believe, at MIT. Somebody at MIT may differ from me. And when we had one business, I said, Bob, I need your consultancy. And he said, no problem. He says, Kevin, with you, I'll take equity. I don't want to worry about payment because, you have a pretty good track record. And we had him 1 hour a month. Let me tell you something. That 1 hour a month was invaluable. He'd sort of help us steer our ship. So, it's not always how much quantity, it's who you bring to the table and how you build those relationships with people. And having the best of the best be available to you by building a personal relationship with them. And so if I want to go into cybersecurity, I know the person that I want to talk to. If I want to go into food and beverage, I talk to my son. He's the foodie in the family, okay? If I want to talk about the latest in innovations in civil rights, I talk to my daughter. But, you look at the people in your constellation of friends and family, and you look for people who are experts, and you iterate. I co-chaired science at Cornell as a tech transfer as a trustee, and the scientists' favorite word, in my opinion, is iteration. Iterate. They take dots, and then they realize what the straight line is through those dots. But iteration is sort of like empirical. You got to try different angles to understand the true straight line. And so I really, when I'm investing in a business, I want to get 3, 4, 5, 6 perspectives on that business. And I encourage negativity. It's just like when you do an interview. I don't want to know about the good thing about that person. He just referred me to you. What's the bad thing? You know what I mean? I want to know, what do you think? I want to iterate. And in iterating, I can draw that straight line because I've heard so many different perspectives. So we have lots of relationships, whether it's through Cornell, whether it's through all the businesses, whether it's the family offices that I speak with all the time. I meet so many interesting people and so many interesting experts. So I tap into that expert and say, what do you think? And I'd love to hear what they have to say. Iterate.
We have come to the end of today's discussion, which I found highly captivating. On behalf of the Global Young Entrepreneur Society, Kevin McGovern, thank you very much for speaking with us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Always. You have an obligation. When God is good to you, you have to give back. And Andrew Carnegie, I love his expression, a rich man is really not a success if he dies completely a rich man. Your obligation is to give back what God has given you.